The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above the polished marble floor, their sterile glow bouncing off the corporate glass walls of Albright Enterprises, a company built on innovation, yet rotting quietly in its culture of arrogance. At the center of it all stood Harold Brinks, the regional boss, a man known less for his business acumen and more for his venomous tongue. His suits were always pressed to perfection, his shoes polished, and his ego polished even brighter. He didn't walk so much as strut, his chest puffed out as if the air around him owed him space. That morning, as employees shuffled into the lobby, Harold spotted a figure that gave him the perfect stage to flaunt his cruelty. Samuel, the janitor, a wiry man with salt and pepper hair and quiet eyes, was down on one knee, scrubbing a stubborn stain from the marble floor. His uniform was faded, his hands calloused from years of unseen labor, but there was something unshakably dignified about him, though Harold never saw it. "Move out of the way, mop boy," Harold sneered loudly, his voice slicing through the murmur of arriving staff. Heads turned. Harold lived for that attention. He gestured theatrically at Samuel, as though presenting a circus clown. "You've missed the spot. No surprise there. I suppose it takes a special kind of failure to make cleaning look difficult." The laughter bubbled up from a few employees, nervous chuckles forced by fear rather than humor. They knew Harold's game. He thrived on humiliation, and not joining in could turn his scorn on them. Samuel, however, did not rise to the bait. He pressed the cloth firmly against the marble, his jaw tightening, but his gaze calm. The quiet strength in his silence only enraged Harold further. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or are you too busy daydreaming about a promotion to senior toilet scrubber?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough for those nearby to hear, but loud enough to sting. "Here's some advice. People like you don't climb ladders, Samuel. You just carry 'em for the rest of us." The cruel remark hung in the air. For a moment, even the nervous chuckles faded into uncomfortable silence. Samuel stood slowly, folding his rag neatly, and met Harold's eyes. His lips parted as though he might speak, but he closed them again, his restraint both baffling and infuriating. Harold smirked, raising his voice again to address the growing crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, remember this when you're working late tonight. No matter how low you feel, at least you're not Samuel. At least you didn't fail so badly at life that your career goal is scrubbing other people's footprints off the floor." The cruelty landed like a stone tossed into still water, ripples of discomfort spreading across the lobby. Some employees shifted uncomfortably, others looked away. Samuel simply lowered his gaze, picked up his bucket, and turned toward the supply closet. It was then the atmosphere shifted. The glass doors of the lobby hissed open, and in walked Richard Albright, the elusive CEO himself. His presence was rare, and when it happened, it turned heads. Unlike Harold, Richard carried no arrogance in his step. He moved with quiet authority, the kind that needed no performance. His silver hair framed a face lined with wisdom rather than vanity, and his tailored suit whispered refinement without shouting it. He didn't walk so much as strut. His chest puffed out as if the air around him owed him space. The crowd stiffened instantly. Conversations halted. Harold, sensing opportunity, puffed up further. He turned toward Richard, preparing to put on his most sycophantic smile. "Ah, Mr. Albright, what a pleasant surprise to see you here in the trenches with us common folk. We were just—" But Richard's gaze wasn't on Harold. It was on Samuel. The janitor had paused mid-step, still holding his bucket, surprise flickering across his normally calm features. The CEO's voice carried effortlessly across the marble lobby, soft yet commanding. "Good morning, Samuel." The lobby froze. Harold blinked, his fake smile faltering. Did the CEO know the janitor's name? Samuel inclined his head respectfully. "Good morning, sir." Richard approached him, bypassing Harold completely. "How's your back? Still giving you trouble from last winter?" Samuel gave a small smile. "A little, but nothing I can't manage. Thank you for asking." Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Harold's face turned a shade paler, but he forced a laugh. "Oh, you know each other." Richard turned slowly toward Harold, his gaze piercing, the weight of thousands unspoken judgments in his eyes. His reply was calm, but it struck with the force of a hammer. "Know him?" He stepped closer to Samuel, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "This man built this company's foundation long before you ever stepped into a pressed suit. He worked overtime when we couldn't afford contractors. He repaired leaks in the dead of night to keep operations running. He stayed behind after storms to make sure no one slipped walking in the next morning. When others complained, he solved. When others walked away, he stayed. And through all of it, he never once asked for recognition." The silence was deafening. Harold's lips parted, but no sound came out. His eyes darted around desperately, searching for an ally in the crowd, but none dared meet his gaze. Richard let the pause linger before delivering the line that would echo through the halls of Albright Enterprises for years to come. "Respect isn't measured by titles, Harold. It's measured by character." And by that measure, his eyes narrowed ever so slightly, "You've just exposed yourself as the smallest man in this building." The words landed like thunder. Gasps rippled across the lobby. Some employees stared wide-eyed. Others suppressed smiles that trembled at the corners of their mouths. Harold stood frozen, stripped of his arrogance, suddenly naked in the glow of the CEO's truth. Richard turned back to Samuel, giving him a nod of quiet acknowledgement, the kind that spoke louder than applause. Samuel inclined his head again, his dignity unbroken, perhaps even stronger than before. And with that, the CEO walked past, leaving Harold standing in the ruins of his own cruelty. The crowd dispersed slowly, but the story had already taken root. In hushed whispers, in exchanged glances, in the newfound respect that followed Samuel through the halls, the moment lived on. Yet what no one realized, not Harold, not the employees, not even Samuel himself, was that this was only the beginning. For respect, once denied, has a way of coming back with a vengeance, and Harold was about to learn that some lessons don't just sting, they burn.
The next days inside Albright Enterprises carried a strange energy. The lobby incident had spread like wildfire, whispered over coffee breaks, retold in hushed tones in the cafeteria, replayed in emails and text messages between staff. Harold Brinks, once the self-proclaimed king of the office, now carried an invisible mark upon him. Where once employees chuckled at his jokes, they now fell silent. Where once they scrambled to please, they now avoided his gaze. His authority hadn't vanished on paper, but respect, the real power, had slipped through his fingers like sand. Samuel, on the other hand, noticed the quiet shift in the air around him. Colleagues who had walked past him without a glance now greeted him with warm nods, some even stopping to exchange genuine conversation. He didn't seek the attention, nor did he revel in Harold's humiliation, but deep inside, the sting of countless years of invisible labor softened under this new light. For once, he wasn't just the janitor. But Harold couldn't stand it. He seethed behind his closed office door, the humiliation gnawing at him like rust eating through steel. Every whisper in the hallway sounded like laughter at his expense. Every sideways glance felt like mockery, and at the heart of it all, he blamed Samuel. "Who does he think he is?" Harold hissed to himself, pacing across the carpet. "A janitor, of all people, making me look like a fool in front of the CEO. No, I won't let this stand." What Harold didn't know was that Richard Albright, the CEO, hadn't simply defended Samuel out of charity. Their connection ran deeper. Years ago, when Richard was a struggling entrepreneur building Albright Enterprises from scratch, Samuel was one of the first hires, not as janitor, but as a handyman, an all-purpose problem solver. When the company couldn't afford proper maintenance crews, Samuel patched pipes, wired lights, and even helped set up the very first office floor. Richard often worked side by side with him late into the night. Over time, their bond grew, not of equals in position, but of equals in respect. Samuel had asked for only one thing: to remain in a humble role, never aspiring to climb the corporate ladder, content with honest work and steady pay. For Richard, that humility was the very core of integrity. Harold, however, dug his own grave. One late evening, driven by a bitter need for revenge, Harold stormed into the HR department. "I want Samuel dismissed," he barked at the HR director, a cautious woman named Linda. "We don't need him anymore. Outsource cleaning, whatever it takes. He's a distraction and a liability." Linda frowned. "Mr. Brinks, with all due respect, Samuel has been with the company longer than most of us. His record is spotless." "Spotless?" Harold sneered. "He scrubs floors, Linda. That's hardly an achievement." Linda shifted uncomfortably. "Still, firing him without cause could raise questions, especially after what happened last week." Harold's jaw clenched. "Then make up a cause. Find one, or you'll regret it." But Harold's threat never landed. What he didn't know was that Linda had already spoken to Richard about Samuel, and Richard had given explicit instructions. Samuel stays untouchable. So when Harold's demand reached Richard's ears, it was the final straw. The very next morning, Richard called for a surprise town hall meeting. Employees gathered in the main conference hall, buzzing with speculation. Harold strutted in, trying to mask his unease, while Samuel slipped quietly into the back, unnoticed at first. Richard stepped onto the stage. His calm presence silenced the room. "Good morning, everyone. I've been reflecting on what makes a company thrive. Not just profits, not just innovations, but people, every single one of you, who carries this company forward." He paused, letting the words sink in. His gaze swept across the crowd, landing briefly on Harold, before continuing. "Too often respect in a workplace is confused with hierarchy, but hierarchy without respect is brittle. It collapses under pressure. True strength comes from recognizing dignity in every role, whether it's closing $1 million deal or ensuring our workplace is safe and clean." The audience nodded, many exchanging knowing glances. He gestured toward the back of the room. "Samuel, would you join me up here?" A murmur ran through the crowd as Samuel, startled, set down his bucket and walked slowly to the stage. He stood awkwardly beside Richard, hands clasped in front of him, unsure what to expect. Richard placed a hand on his shoulder. "This man has given more to this company than most of you know. He was here before the first product launch, before the first office expansion. He worked nights fixing what was broken so mornings could begin smoothly. Without his sacrifices, Albright Enterprises might not even stand today." The hall erupted in applause, genuine and thunderous. Samuel's cheeks flushed, his usual composure bending under the weight of so much recognition. But Richard wasn't finished. His tone sharpened